Hello, I thought I'd do a mid-month wrap-up this time because I've had a really good beginning of March, 8 books, which is incredible. But then again, I am working my way through the Carnegie Medal long list, so some of them are very short. The first one that I read was Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas, and this was a book about a young lad, 17-year-old maverick who was part of a gang whose father was in jail, and it's the story of almost a coming of age story because he finds out that he's a father. A DNA test proves that he's the father of a 3-month-old boy. So it's him coming to terms with fatherhood. And it's a book about violence and gangs and drugs. Ideal for getting uninspired boy readers to read. The second one was A Net Galley, The Dance Tree by Karin Millwood Hargrave. And this was set in Strasbourg in 1518 and is based on the dancing plague that occurred at that time when women had this sort of religious fervour, this mania, and they danced and danced and danced and didn't stop. And we focus on 4 women, Lisbeth, Ida, Sophie and Agneta. And it's their story. Lisbeth is the main one of the 4 that we follow. And it's their story dealing with patriarchy and this dancing plague and the relationships between them. That was a very sort of tender book exploring motherhood, sexuality, madness and superstition. The next one was one of the Carnegies, and it was October by Katya, Balen. And this was about a young girl called October who lived with her dad in the woods, totally off-grid. She knew everything about nature, about woods, about trees, about seasons. And when her dad has an accident, she's taken to London, to the big city, to live with her mother. And it's the story of her coming to terms with a life that she's never experienced before. She's never made friends before. She's never been in a city before. She's never been in school before. So it's a story about her coming to terms with changes in her life. And it's very evocative descriptions in this book. And that was that one. The next one was another Carnegie, and that was The Valley of Lost Secrets by Lesley, Parr. And this is set in World War II. And it follows a group of evacuees who've moved from London to Wales, a small mining village in Wales. And you've got Jimmy, who's 12, and his little brother, Ronnie. And they go and live with a couple, Gwen and Alan Thomas. Alan's a miner. And you see how some of the villagers treat the evacuees. They treat them with distrust. There's a little bit of thieving in the village, and it's evacuees that must have done it. There's bullying from the other school children. There's even bullying from some of the adults who should know better. So it's a story of discovery, learning what is important, and friendship and family. That's that story. The next one was also a Carnegie Medal, and it was Kane Warriors by Wheatle. And this is a book about slavery. It's a book about Tacky's Rebellion in 1760, which was one of the first slave rebellions in Jamaica. And we follow 14-year-old Moa, who is asked to join the rebellion, and the story is told through his eyes. And he questions everything. He questions why they're doing it, how they're doing it. But at the end of the day, he knows that he's got to do it because he's got to fight to allow his mother and little sister to be free, to allow his father to be free. It's hard-hitting, it's brutal, and it takes a little bit of getting into because it's all in the Jamaican dialect, but once you get tuned into it, no problem at all. The final one of the Carnegies that I read this month was Rat by Patrice Lawrence. And this is about 12-year-old Al, who lives with his mum, who's just got out of jail, and they have problems with their neighbour who lives in the flat underneath them. And when mum gets put back into jail again, Al blames the neighbour, and this is the book of him plotting his revenge and what transpires from that. It's a book about learning that not everybody is what you see on the surface, that everybody's got layers. The next one was a NetGalley one, and this was also a young adult one, and it was called Fake by, I think you pronounce it, Ele Fountain. And this was set in the future. It's almost a dystopian one. It's set in the future, not very far away from where we are now, because it's set after a pandemic. And all the children are taught at home. Nobody mixes. Children aren't allowed to mix. They stay in their houses until 14 because it's believed that their immune systems aren't strong enough. And at 14 they will go to school. And the main character, Jess, she's got a secret. She's a hacker. And when she finds out that things aren't quite as she expected, she hacks into the system, causes all sorts of problems, and then this is the story of how she has to risk everything to right the wrong that she did. But it's a very interesting premise, the fact that everything is online and nobody's allowed to mix, and the control and the manipulation. It doesn't sound too many miles away from where we are now. And the last one was another Carnegie. I did say I'd read the last one, but I hadn't. Another Carnegie, and it's this, The Crossing by Manjeet Mann. I said I'd been waiting for a wow book to hit me, and it was this one. It's in verse, and it's the story of Natalie, who's lost her mum, but decides that she wants to swim the channel to honour her mother, and Sammy, who's a refugee from Eritrea, and his journey to try and get to the UK. And it's the story of the connection between them, and it is in verse, which really condenses the language and condenses the emotions. And it's powerful, it's sad, and I loved it. And this is actually my book of the month. Crossing is my book of the month. This is the best book I read. I say it's not the book of the month because it's not the end of the month, it's the mid-month. It's the book of the mid-month. So in the second half of March, we'll have to see whether this still is in first place. So, happy reading, take care,